That CBST was even created was such a landmark thing of these brave people. I want you to start at the beginning and just set the stage for me in New York City, what it was like kind of before Stonewall and around that time for gay Jews in New York.
Nothing was public, nothing was known. It was a culture of fear, a culture of secrecy, a culture of hiding. In the secular world, in the Jewish world, it was the same thing. Nobody thought it was possible to be gay and Jewish at the same time. You had to choose.
Because
nobody could have imagined such a thing. There wasn't anything in the vocabulary to talk about it. There were ancient oppressions that people held on to, ideas. It wasn't possible to live an open, fulfilling life of dignity. So 1973, you have the founding of Lambda Legal.
Yep.
You have the founding of what's now NGLTF, and you have the founding of CBST. 3 organizations that have stood the test of time, that have transformed the world legally in society and in Jewish and religious life for queer people.
Talk to me about the beginning of CBST. How did it happen?
So in 1973, Jacob Gabe, who was a gay man originally from India, put an ad in the Village Voice advertising a gay Shabbat service, a gay synagogue. And it met at the Church of the Holy Apostles, which is a progressive Episcopal church in Chelsea, which has historically been at the epicenter of some amazing social movements, and it was where a lot of the early gay organizations met. And he showed up with a shopping bag with challah and candles and candlesticks and waited to see what happened.
And what happened?
People came.
Wow. From an ad in the Village Voice.
From an ad in the Voice, and people showed up. People were hungry for it, and so he didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a learned Jewish guy. So they came and they cobbled it together. After a few weeks, someone came who did come from a deeply Jewish background, actually a Hasidic background, who had left Judaism when he came out, and through that came back to his Judaism and became the de facto spiritual leader of this community as it began to meet and celebrate Shabbat and announced that it was possible to be Jewish and gay.
Wow. That is so analog. I love it. An ad in the Village Voice. I miss analog.
And
You know what I mean?
Can you talk a little bit about the history of the synagogue's relationship with the Pride Parade and Heritage of Pride, and maybe compare to the extent you can or contrast it with some more Jewish organizations like the Israeli Day Parade?
so, from the beginning, CBST members have been marching, have been organizing, have been grand marshals of the Pride March, and unambivalently able to be there. And in times before people were able to be out in their daily lives, Pride was kind of a free zone where people could come and be out and be open and be safe for one day a year, long before that was possible most days of the year.
Right.
In terms of the Jewish world, it was much more complicated. CBST members from the start were very involved in Jewish life, were active in Soviet Jewry marches early on, and had to be really, and wanted to come as a community, but had to be very mindful of being outed. In that time, to be publicly identified as gay could mean losing your job, could mean losing your apartment. There were no legal protections. CBST had a banner that said Congregation Beit Simchat Torah on the first line, and then on the second line it said the Gay Synagogue, and the second line zipped off, so that at the Gay Pride March it said the whole thing, and at the Soviet Jewry March they zipped off the Gay Synagogue because they wanted to march as CBST, but they couldn't be openly identified as gay. I mean, can you imagine? This was 40 years ago, less than 40 years ago.
I just love the creativity of designing the zip off. I mean, you
It's
gotta
impressive.
give it up. You
A
zip it
convertible
off, you put
garment,
it on,
you
the
got-
convertible. I mean,
Yeah,
talk about analog.
seriously.
Has the congregation also included straight couples and families?
At the beginning, there were always some straight people. At the beginning, they were the friends and family of the gay members. There were a couple of supportive mothers of some of the men who became the mothers of everybody because a lot of people had been rejected by their mothers. And so there were a few mothers. There was an aunt who became extremely, extremely important figures, really pivotal people in the lives of these young men who had been abandoned by their own mothers. There became a tradition of a family and friends Shabbat, the Shabbat before Gay Pride, where people could bring all of their straight, supportive family and friends at a safe moment. And as the years went by, that increased. It was a great synagogue. People liked to go there. People could be as they were and weren't asked to be someone who they weren't, whatever that meant. And so that population absolutely grew. In the 90s, as law and technology started to catch up to the desires of people to have families, it became much more possible for LGBT people to bring kids into their lives. Before that point, many people had to make very, very painful choices to stay in the closet or to come out and possibly give up the possibility of having children. And so as soon as there were children, there started to be programs to educate those children. There was a very strong sense of responsibility to the next generation, both by people who had children and who didn't, but understood that they were building something for the generation to come.
I think I came to my first service, I think it was Rosh Hashanah in 1991. And I remember my mom said, "Find a husband. I beg you, find a husband." And that chorus has continued over the years.
Yes.
But have there been a lot of love connections made at CBST?
Oh, yes.
I was just curious. I think about it every
The
year when I go.
matchmaking vibe at
Yeah.
the Javits Center is
Yes.
legendary.
Yes.
There have been some very special matches made
Really?
within the community. And the whole idea of marriage being possible
Right.
is a fairly new idea.
Absolutely.
But there are some very special families that have been created.